On July 18, 2012, welfare officers Amanda Chen and Detective Senior Constable Paul Richardson received what they initially believed was a routine truancy report. 3 children from an unregistered family had failed to appear at Boorowa Public School for the entire academic term. What these officials discovered in the remote bushland of New South Wales would expose Australia's most isolated and disturbing bloodline case in modern history. Following a dirt track that wound through dense eucalyptus forest, the team found themselves face-to-face with a settlement that seemed frozen in time. 40 individuals, spanning 4 generations, lived in a collection of rust-stained caravans, military surplus tents, and makeshift shacks constructed from salvaged materials. No running water. No electricity. No connection to the outside world beyond this hidden valley. The investigation revealed a family bound not just by blood, but by decades of secrecy, systematic isolation, and generational intermarriage that would shock medical professionals worldwide. This is the story of the Colt family, a name changed by courts to protect the innocent, and how their discovery would fundamentally change child protection services across Australia. Let us know in the comments where you're watching from, because what happened in this hidden valley would expose the darkest consequences of complete social isolation. The remote valley where the Colt family established their settlement lay approximately 40 kilometers southwest of Boorowa, accessible only by a deteriorating fire trail that became impassable during winter rains. Local property records indicate the family had occupied various sites across this region since the late 1970s, moving whenever authorities or neighboring farmers became suspicious of their activities. The clan's matriarch, referred to in court documents as Betty Colt, had arrived in New South Wales from rural Victoria in 1978 with her partner and several children. Medical records later revealed that Betty herself was the product of a relationship between first cousins, establishing a pattern that would continue for 4 decades. The family's nomadic lifestyle across remote areas of New South Wales and South Australia allowed them to avoid regular contact with schools, medical services, and government agencies. By 2012, the settlement housed members spanning 4 generations, all living in conditions that Dr. Sarah Mitchell, a specialist in rural health services, would later describe as medieval in their deprivation. The compound consisted of 12 structures, 8 caravans dating from the 1980s, 2 military surplus tents, and 2 crude shelters constructed from corrugated iron and plastic sheeting. Water came from a single bore well that testing would later reveal was contaminated with dangerous levels of bacteria. Waste disposal consisted of open pits dug behind the living areas. Electricity was generated by a single diesel generator that operated sporadically when fuel was available. The family survived on government benefits collected under various false identities and occasional work performed by adult males in nearby towns. This isolation wasn't accidental. It was systematic, designed to maintain what social worker Margaret Thompson would later describe as a deliberate separation from any institution that might interfere with their way of life. Detective Senior Constable Paul Richardson later testified that nothing in his 15 years of rural policing had prepared him for what they encountered on that July morning. The first sign of habitation was the smell, a mixture of wood smoke, human waste, and decomposing organic matter that carried on the wind for nearly half a kilometer before they reached the settlement. Welfare Officer Amanda Chen documented the initial contact in her official report. At approximately 10:30 a.m., we approached the first caravan and called out to announce our presence. A woman emerged who identified herself as Martha. She appeared to be in her 40s but moved with difficulty, later determined to be caused by untreated hip dysplasia. She was immediately hostile, demanding to know who had sent us. The children they had come to investigate were nowhere visible initially. Richardson counted at least 6 adults moving between the structures, all showing varying degrees of physical deformities. The first thing you noticed, Richardson recalled during court proceedings, was that several individuals had distinctive facial features, pronounced brow ridges, widely spaced eyes, and what medical professionals would later identify as classic indicators of genetic disorders associated with inbreeding. When the children finally appeared, Chen documented finding 12 individuals between the ages of 5 and 17, though determining exact ages proved difficult as none possessed birth certificates or medical records. The children displayed what Dr. Robert Fenwick, a pediatric specialist, would later describe as severe developmental delays inconsistent with any single medical condition, but entirely consistent with multiple generations of genetic bottlenecking. 3 children appeared unable to speak beyond basic words. Several showed signs of malnutrition, despite food stamps and benefits being collected on their behalf. Most disturbing to the initial responders was the children's reaction to their presence. absolute silence and apparent terror when approached by outsiders. The family's resistance to cooperation became immediately apparent. Adult members formed a physical barrier between the children and the welfare officers, with several individuals making threats about government interference and their right to live free. This confrontational stance would characterize every subsequent interaction with authorities. The medical findings that emerged from the Colt case would become textbook examples in genetic counseling programs worldwide. Dr. Michael Torres, Chief of Pediatric Genetics at Westmead Children's Hospital, led the comprehensive medical evaluation of the children removed from the settlement. His team's findings, published in the Journal of Medical Genetics in 2014, documented the most severe case of multi-generational inbreeding recorded in modern Australian medical history. Genetic testing revealed that all children in the settlement were the products of relationships between close relatives, siblings, first cousins, or parent-child relationships spanning 4 generations. Dr. Torres explained, "What we observed was genetic bottlenecking taken to an extreme degree. The limited gene pool had concentrated deleterious recessive alleles to a point where virtually every child displayed multiple genetic disorders. The specific conditions documented included severe intellectual disabilities affecting all 12 children, with IQ scores ranging from 35 to 60. 8 children presented with physical deformities including cleft palates, heart murmurs, and skeletal abnormalities. 6 children showed signs of fetal alcohol spectrum disorders, suggesting substance abuse during pregnancies. Most concerning to medical professionals was the discovery of previously undocumented genetic conditions that appeared unique to this family line. Social worker Margaret Thompson spent 4 months documenting the family's living conditions and internal structure. Her 847-page report became the foundation for subsequent legal proceedings. Thompson discovered that the family operated under strict internal hierarchies, with older female relatives controlling access to resources and information. Children were systematically isolated from educational opportunities, medical care, and any contact with the outside world. The camp sanitation conditions posed immediate health risks. Environmental Health Officer David Kumar documented that the family's water source contained bacterial levels 400 times higher than safe drinking standards. Waste disposal methods had contaminated the immediate soil to dangerous levels. Food storage consisted of open containers that attracted vermin, while spoiled food was simply discarded around the living areas. Educational deprivation was perhaps the most shocking discovery. None of the children could read beyond a kindergarten level. Mathematical skills were virtually non-existent. Most children could not identify basic objects, colors, or concepts that would be familiar to any child with normal social exposure. Child psychologist Dr. Elena Rodriguez noted, "These children had been systematically denied every opportunity for normal cognitive development." Court documents and welfare records pieced together the Colt family's 4-decade journey across rural Australia, revealing a deliberate pattern of movement designed to avoid institutional oversight. The family's origins traced back to 1978, when matriarch Betty Colt and her partner Charlie Colt first appeared in regional Victoria. Local newspaper archives show they initially worked seasonal agricultural jobs before disappearing after child welfare services received anonymous complaints about their children's welfare. The investigation revealed a systematic approach to avoiding detection that spanned multiple states. The family would typically remain in one location for 18 to 24 months, just long enough to establish government benefit claims under false identities, before moving to avoid potential welfare investigations. They maintained this pattern across New South Wales, South Australia, and Queensland, always selecting remote properties where their isolation wouldn't attract attention from neighbors or authorities. Dr. Patricia Williams, a specialist in generational trauma, analyzed the family's behavioral patterns for her 2015 research paper on isolated communities. She identified several key factors that enabled the Colt family's continued isolation: deliberate geographic selection of properties with difficult access, strategic use of multiple false identities to collect benefits, and systematic indoctrination of children to fear and avoid contact with outsiders. The genetic isolation became increasingly severe with each generation. First-generation members showed relatively minor physical abnormalities, while fourth-generation children displayed profound developmental disabilities and multiple genetic disorders. Medical geneticist Dr. Robert Chen explained, "Each generation represented a further narrowing of the gene pool, concentrating harmful recessive alleles to an extreme degree rarely seen in human populations." Cultural anthropologist Dr. Marie Davidson compared the Colt case to historical examples of isolated communities, noting significant differences. Unlike religious communities or geographic isolates that maintain some external contact, the Colt family created absolute separation from modern society. This wasn't cultural preservation, it was systematic deprivation of basic human rights across multiple generations. The family's movements could be tracked through benefit records, though they used at least 15 different surnames and birth dates across 4 decades. This systematic identity fraud enabled them to avoid the scrutiny that consistent documentation would have triggered. The pattern only ended when educational authorities in Boorowa began cross-referencing enrollment records with benefit recipients, leading to the discovery that triggered the 2012 intervention. The legal proceedings that followed the Colt family's discovery became landmark cases in Australian family law. Supreme Court Justice Patricia McDonald presided over the initial custody hearings, describing the case as presenting unprecedented challenges to traditional concepts of family rights versus child protection. The complexity arose from the sheer number of individuals involved and the multi-generational nature of the alleged abuse. Children's Court Magistrate Robert Thompson ordered the immediate removal of all 12 children on July 20, 2012, just 2 days after their discovery. His emergency order cited imminent risk to physical and psychological safety due to severe neglect, medical deprivation, and exposure to ongoing genetic harm through continued isolation. The removal process required coordination between multiple government departments and specialized medical teams. The breakthrough testimony came from Dr. Michael Torres, whose genetic analysis provided irrefutable evidence of the family's inbreeding patterns. Torres testified, "The probability of these specific genetic combinations occurring naturally in an outbred population approaches 0. The medical evidence clearly demonstrates systematic reproduction between close relatives across multiple generations." His testimony lasted 4 days and included detailed explanations of genetic inheritance patterns for the court. Legal challenges emerged immediately as adult family members, represented by public defender Sarah Chen, argued that their lifestyle choices constituted religious freedom and cultural autonomy. Chen's defense strategy centered on challenging the state's authority to intervene in family structures that didn't conform to mainstream social norms. This argument was systematically dismantled by evidence of severe child neglect and medical deprivation. Crown Prosecutor James Mitchell presented evidence spanning 8 months of investigation. Medical records documented severe developmental delays in all children. Educational assessments showed systematic deprivation of learning opportunities. Most damning was forensic evidence suggesting that the isolation was deliberately maintained to prevent discovery of ongoing abuse within the family structure. The national media attention began in November 2012, when court documents were unsealed following conviction of several family members on charges including child neglect, sexual assault, and welfare fraud. The ABC's Four Corners program dedicated a special investigation to the case, interviewed child protection experts, and examined systemic failures that allowed the situation to continue undetected for decades. Sentencing occurred throughout 2013, with 5 adult family members receiving prison terms ranging from 3 to 12 years. The sentences reflected both the severity of child neglect and the systematic nature of the family's efforts to avoid detection. Justice McDonald noted, "These sentences must reflect society's absolute rejection of actions that deliberately harm children and deprive them of fundamental human rights." The rehabilitation of the Colt children became one of the most comprehensive child protection interventions in Australian history. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, Director of Pediatric Psychology at Sydney Children's Hospital, coordinated the initial assessment and treatment planning for all 12 children. Her team faced unprecedented challenges in addressing severe developmental delays, genetic conditions, and psychological trauma simultaneously. Medical intervention began immediately upon removal from the settlement. 3 children required emergency surgery for previously untreated conditions including heart defects and cleft palates. 8 children needed intensive nutritional rehabilitation to address chronic malnutrition. All children required comprehensive dental care, as none had ever received professional dental treatment. The psychological rehabilitation proved equally complex. Child psychologist Dr. Rebecca Martinez noted, "These children had been systematically isolated from normal human interaction. Simple concepts like traffic lights, television, or indoor plumbing were completely foreign to them. We essentially had to teach them how to exist in modern society while simultaneously addressing severe developmental delays and trauma." Foster placement presented unique challenges due to the children's special needs and behavioral issues. The Department of Family and Community Services worked with specialized foster families trained in caring for children with genetic disorders and severe developmental delays. Social worker Jennifer Adams coordinated placements, noting, "We needed families capable of providing intensive support while helping these children learn basic life skills that most children develop naturally." Educational rehabilitation required specially designed programs. None of the children could attend mainstream schools initially. Special education coordinator Dr. Michael Stevens developed individualized learning plans. "We started with basic concepts like colors, numbers, and simple vocabulary. Some children made remarkable progress, while others remained severely limited by their genetic conditions. The long-term outcomes varied significantly among the children. 3 children, removed at younger ages, eventually integrated into mainstream education with ongoing support. 5 children required permanent specialized care due to severe intellectual disabilities. 4 children made modest progress but remained in supervised living arrangements as adults. Medical monitoring continued throughout their development. Dr. Torres's team tracked the children's genetic conditions and provided ongoing genetic counseling. Several children developed additional health complications related to their genetic inheritance, requiring lifelong medical management. Success stories emerged despite the challenges. Sarah, removed at age 7, eventually completed high school with support and now works in a supervised employment program. Her caseworker, Maria Gonzalez, noted, "Sarah's progress demonstrates the resilience children can show when removed from harmful situations and provided with appropriate support." The public reaction to the Colt case sparked nationwide debate about government oversight, individual rights, and the protection of children in isolated communities. Opinion polls conducted by the Australian Institute in late 2012 showed that 89% of Australians supported increased government intervention powers for child protection, while 67% expressed concern about privacy rights implications. The systematic failures that allowed the Colt situation to continue undetected for decades prompted comprehensive reviews of child protection services across Australia. NSW Department of Family and Community Services Director Patricia Williams commissioned an independent review led by former Family Court Judge Robert Thompson. The resulting 400-page report identified critical gaps in interagency communication, rural service delivery, and early intervention strategies. Policy reforms implemented in response to the Colt case included mandatory cross-referencing of benefit recipients with school enrollment records, enhanced training for rural teachers to identify at-risk children, and improved coordination between health services, education departments, and child protection agencies. These reforms, collectively known as the Colt Protocols, were adopted by all Australian states by 2015. The case prompted significant changes in genetic counseling services. Dr. Michael Torres advocated for enhanced screening programs in rural and remote communities, noting, "The Colt case demonstrated that genetic isolation can occur even in modern societies. We need proactive identification and intervention strategies for at-risk populations." Educational awareness programs were developed for rural communities, focusing on identifying signs of child neglect and isolation. Rural teacher training now includes specific modules on recognizing children who may be living in isolated family situations. School principal Margaret Chen, who implemented these programs in Western NSW, reported, "Teachers are now trained to recognize not just obvious abuse, but also signs of systematic educational and social deprivation." The case influenced legal precedents regarding family autonomy versus child protection. Constitutional law professor Dr. James Mitchell noted, "The Colt case established that cultural or lifestyle choices cannot supersede children's fundamental rights to health, education, and safety. This principle has influenced subsequent family law decisions across Australia." International attention brought researchers from universities worldwide to study the case's implications for child protection policy. The United Nations Committee on the Rights of the Child cited the Colt case in their 2016 report as an example of effective government intervention to protect children's fundamental rights. Long-term policy impact includes ongoing monitoring systems designed to identify isolated families who may be depriving children of basic services. These systems, while controversial among privacy advocates, have identified and intervened in several similar situations since 2012, preventing the development of conditions comparable to those found in the Colt settlement. 10 years after their removal from the settlement, the Colt children's outcomes demonstrate both the potential for recovery and the lasting impact of severe early deprivation. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, who continued tracking their progress, published comprehensive outcome data in 2022. Her longitudinal study revealed that early intervention age was the single most significant predictor of long-term success in rehabilitation. The children removed before age 8 showed remarkable resilience and adaptation. Sarah, now 21, completed vocational training and works in a supported employment program. Michael, removed at age 6, graduated from high school and now lives independently with minimal support services. Their success stories became case studies in graduate programs for social workers and special education teachers. However, the older children and those with more severe genetic conditions faced ongoing challenges. 4 individuals require permanent supervised care due to profound intellectual disabilities. 3 others live in group homes with varying degrees of independence. These outcomes underscore both the potential for human recovery and the irreversible impact of severe early neglect. The case's influence on academic research continues expanding. Dr. Patricia Williams's longitudinal study of the family's rehabilitation became foundational reading in social work programs. Genetic research based on the family's DNA samples contributed to understanding of inbreeding effects in human populations. Child development specialists continue analyzing the case to understand critical periods for intervention in severely neglected children. Memorial recognition came in 2017 when the NSW Parliament passed the Children's Protection Enhancement Act, informally known as the Colt Law. This legislation strengthened government powers to intervene in cases of systematic child deprivation and established the Children's Advocacy Institute. The institute provides training, research, and policy development to prevent similar situations from developing undetected. The settlement site itself became part of a land conservation program, with access restricted to researchers studying the long-term environmental impact of the family's occupation. Environmental scientist Dr. David Kumar's team continues monitoring soil and water recovery in the area, providing data on environmental rehabilitation following contamination by human habitation. International recognition includes the case's inclusion in child protection training programs across multiple countries. The Colt protocols developed in Australia have been adapted by child protection services in New Zealand, Canada, and several European nations. The case demonstrates how systematic isolation and deprivation can occur even in developed nations with established social services. The Colt case serves as a powerful reminder that vigilance, compassion, and institutional accountability are the essential safeguards of any civilized society. It demonstrates that children's fundamental rights to health, education, and safety must take precedence over claims of cultural autonomy or family privacy. Most importantly, it shows that even children subjected to the most severe deprivation can recover and thrive when provided with appropriate support and intervention. The legacy continues through the ongoing success of survivors who overcame extraordinary challenges, the policy reforms that protect other children, and the enhanced awareness among professionals who encounter at-risk families. Their story reminds us that behind every social policy and institutional reform are real children whose futures depend on our collective commitment to their protection and care.